So, Chapter 8 covers active research techniques like how to use databases, what databases are available, new technologies, and also elaborates on new archival research techniques, different online databases, journal databases, news and legal databases that can also be used to gather information about stakeholders. And about publics, and how to distribute your messages effectively through electronic channels. So key terms in this chapter is co-orientation theory, or the co-orientation model of communication, which considers how groups see each other and what they believe other groups think about them. In any relationship, people are aware of at least three perspectives. One, the perception of self, such as honest, strategic, or powerful, for instance. Two, the perception of the other, as maybe friendly, self-serving, manipulative, elitist, etc. And three, meta-communication. Meta-communication assumptions, or the assumptions about what the individual or the organization thinks the other individual or group thinks about them. For instance, they hate us, or they think we don't care. Identification, which we also had a little bit before earlier. According to Burke, persuasion is based on a concept called identification, and as the word implies, rhetoric or persuasion is about helping your audience understand how you're like them and how their interests and your interests mesh. Like, this is what we do in narratives. We try to create that identification. Narratives that we spoke about in Chapter 7. So for Burke, persuasion is built around making your audience feel that you're like them and that you understand them. And Burke used the term consubstantiality, or of one substance, to describe this process. According to Burke, there are three kinds of identification: by sympathy, by antithesis, and by unawareness. Identification by sympathy attempts to make your audience feel positively toward you. Identification by antithesis attempts to invoke commonalities, also called congregation, and differences, also called segregation. And identification by unawareness is in some ways like ethos and refers to the kind of implicit identification that we possess as members of an organization, of a group, a cause or an activity or hobby. Community power theory is essentially that community power theory tells us that people turn to networks of family members, friends, and other influential people and groups for advice. Community power theory also assumes that behavior, attitudes, and opinion changes are less likely and more difficult without the aid of a supportive network of family, of friends, and social organizations. Google Scholar is one of the less well-known features of the popular search engine, and as the name implies, Google Scholar searches for scholarly articles, books, documents, including dissertations and theses and government documents, journal articles, and much more. LexisNexis is a combination of several databases, including business, legal, research, medical, news, biographical information, country profiles, polls and surveys, quotations, state profiles, and also a world almanac. LexisNexis also contains information on members of Congress in America, legislative histories, bills and laws. It has lots of American specific information, but it also covers international law and international information. So you can get not only America-specific information from there. So Lexis, the legal database, provides access to an impressive amount of legal information, including legal news, laws, reviews, legal cases, etc., etc. Again, specific to America, but it also covers, for instance, European Union, other foreign laws, patent research, law firms, law schools, etc. And Nexus, the news database part of it, provides access to daily news, US news, world news, news wires, news transcripts, arts, sports news, non-English news, business news, legal news, and university news. And also contains a medical database providing access to medical news, medical journals, and medical abstracts. So this is a vast resource of information to be able to use. Website addresses are controlled by an organization named ICANN, and this stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. ICANN is based in California, is a non-profit corporation created to oversee the Internet on behalf of the US government. Understanding domain names allows people to make more informed decisions regarding the value of websites visited. More about that later. A cookie refers to a small data file which is stored on the computer of any visitor to a website. Essentially, a cookie file contains information used by a website that someone visits to track that person's activities. So you need to imagine the cookie as a little rucksack that you carry on your back, and whenever you travel on the web, information of that travel is put into that rucksack and stored on your computer, and can be used for data analysis purposes, and it will tell information such as how your navigation is on the internet. It will be able, for instance, companies who use web analysis can then look at click-through rates and many other information. So you travel with this rucksack that gives information to organizations about what you do on your travel, where you come from, where you go to, how you navigate, etc., etc. And all this history is stored for later use. Web analytics refer to the use of tracking software such as Google Analytics or, for instance, StatCounter, and it is so much more an art than a science. It involves drawing upon statistical data such as usability data and patterns of visitor interaction, and you use all this. The reason that it's much more an art than it is science, it's based on science, of course, but interpretation of the data is an art. Converting the data into knowledge about how to design your websites for usability and call for action, that's an art. Survey software. Surveys, as you know, have become the primary research tool of organizations today to learn about their publics, demographics, their psychographics, infographics, etc. And you should, by now, I hope, be familiar with different free online survey software such as SurveyMonkey or Zoomerang or Qualtrics. I know that many students use them. I get so many surveys, questionnaires sent to me. So they're convenient and easy to use, but you should, of course, consider privacy concerns. Don't allow any personal information gained to be used for different purposes, and don't force participants to answer questions in the survey. Allow them to skip questions if they wish. You'll get much better answering rates if you allow for that. Social networking sites will allow you to connect directly with the key publics, and if you consider the co-orientation model of communication, there's a connection between that and social networking sites. As we spoke about earlier on in this presentation, the co-orientation model of communication is how groups see each other and what they believe other groups think about them. And we talked a little bit about these three perspectives. The perception of self, the perception of the other, and the assumptions about what the individual or the organization thinks the other individual or group thinks about them. You should be aware of conflicting perceptions. For instance, a corporation thinks something they did is awesome, but an activist group thinks it's irresponsible. This can lead to problems in communication. The model can also be used to help organizations and governments to understand how individuals and groups external to the organization perceive issues, and how public relations can be used to help organizations and publics co-orient themselves to one another. So the whole idea of understanding this model of co-orientation of communication is about communicating in such a way as to try and understand others' perceptions and their definition of reality. Only that way you will achieve the ability to create compelling messages reliant on such understandings. Persuasion is based on identification, and refers to helping your audience understand how you're like them and how their interests and your interests coincide. Tools to use when achieving identification or trying to achieve identification by sympathy is to things like, I have been where you are, I understand you, I'm working for you to make things better, I'm on your side. These are typical ways of creating identification by sympathy. Identification by antithesis points out enemies and segregates, or brings people together by noting how different others are. For instance, the Democrats believe, or the liberals believe, or, you know, when you say something like that, you always, it's almost like an enthymeme where you also say what you are not. So identification by unawareness is possessed by group members of organizations, sports, universities, political parties, hobbies, etc., etc. And it's the assumed we. We here at TICO believe, we here at VIA University believe. So it's identification by group membership. And you can use that, again, in your communication. Using the word we will automatically kind of create a group feeling. we Apple believers, etc., etc. Identification and social networking has something to do with each other, because social networking can be an effective tool for building identification and for creating narratives. Social networking sites can be mined by organizations for data about publics. So you should be really careful about what you put on Facebook, because it could easily come back and haunt you. People seek out information that comports with their existing attitudes and beliefs. They use media to gain information or entertainment that gratifies them. Community power theory refers to how attitudes and opinions will be hard to change unless an individual's network, family, and friends share that attitude or opinion. People will turn to their networks or to their families and friends to make decisions, and public relation professionals should understand who people are influenced by. This will vary based on age, sex, ethnicity, etc. And also opinion leaders, could be religious leaders, friends, news pundits, etc. Could be parents, teachers. A peripheral route, remember we talked about that in chapter 6, or attempting to influence those who in turn influence others, is sometimes a better way to persuade. Okay, with regards to the community power theory, I also want to add that you should be familiar with the concept, because it also features in one of the marketing buying process models that we know, the buying roles in the buying process. And so the roles differ with regards to those who make the initiative, those who buy the product, those who use the product, but also those who influence the purchase. And this is what community power theory is about, the influencers of the different publics. So what else is available for research? Blogs, often written to be entertaining, commentary on news or personal life. Monitoring blogs is a valuable environmental scanning technique, and you should always be looking at blogs that are relevant to your organization. And you could, like I mentioned earlier, set up RSS feeds so that you'd be notified when anything new happens. Subscribe to blogs, make it easier for you so that it's easier to search and sift through information. Blogs can also be used to disseminate information and shape messages, but you should of course be aware of always being honest about who you are, not trying to conceive the receivers. Usenet and newsgroups used to be very big. I think it's still fairly big in the US. I'm not sure about other countries really. It also grew back in the early 2000s, just after the dot-com burst. We saw lots of news groups, but today they don't really exist in Denmark anymore. They've been taken over by Facebook, by blogs and etc. But generally speaking, Usenet news groups are discussion groups or chat groups where people post messages about organizations. Subscribing to Usenet or news groups allows you to monitor what people are writing and saying about organizations. And of course, you should be careful when joining and when you're posting in such groups on behalf of your organization. Always be transparent. Google has a news group called Google Groups. You can find all sorts of topics within Google Groups internationally. Search engines, of course, available for doing your research. Some tips for searching: always use quotation marks around exact words or phrases. Use as many keywords as possible to limit non-relevant results. Don't look through large lists of results. Try to re-enter the search again with more or different keywords. The order of the words will affect your search results, so try changing the order if you don't get the results you're looking for. Google Scholar is, like I mentioned earlier, a resource for finding academic research. Often it requires subscription, but many students will be able to gain access if they subscribe. And then, of course, LexisNexis, that we also spoke about earlier. You should also look into website validity and reliability. You can do that by using Whois database, where you can look up information about the owners of different domain names. You can analyze domain names and try to establish validity and reliability based on their subdomains and origin, and using the Whois database. So looking at the URL can help you determine the source of the website. Always look at the root address of a website. This will help you determining website credibility. So consider the following. 1. Truthfulness. Is the information accurate? 2. Agreement. Is the information in agreement with other credible sources? 3. General acceptance. Is the idea accepted by experts, or is it completely new and radical? 4. Credibility. Will the information be perceived as credible? 5. Timeliness. Is the information recent? If it's an older source, try looking for newer sources that say the same thing. And 6. Morality. Is the information in the best interests of society? This is all information that can help you establish validity and reliability of websites. So, cookies, counters, and analytics. We've talked about cookies, those small rucksacks containing information of visitors, navigation and traveling to and from on websites. Cookies are used to gather data about you and your browsing activities, and are the basis for web analytics and metrics, items that can be monitored from any backend of an organization's website. Things such as patterns of website visitor interactions, how long people stay, what pages they look at, the stickiness of a website, the bounce rate of the website, and can be used by public relation professionals to improve the usefulness of a website. So, this was a little bit about what is available out there for you to use for your research. That concludes Chapter 8.